A former student of the month with perfect attendance at his high school now charged with the murder of his parents. And that's not all. Bombshell details in a new criminal complaint, including alleged communications about his plans to someone in Russian on a covert messaging app, and allegedly filming his parents' dead body after he allegedly killed them. We're on the case presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. 17-year-old Nikita Casap is now facing 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of hiding a corpse, and there is a lot to unpack in this case. Here's the teen appearing in court in Waukesha, Wisconsin today. He was arrested in Kansas on February 28th after allegedly fleeing on a multi-state road trip, driving his stepfather's stolen VW Atlas. Police say that the bodies of Don Meyer and Tatiana Casap were found inside their home on February 28th. Meyer is Casap's stepdad. Tatiana is his mom. Meyer's mom, who lives in Massachusetts, had called police in Wisconsin to do a wellness check on her son's house. She said that she and Meyer's sister received text messages from Donald that they just found odd. When police entered the house, they found Meyer dead in his office with a gunshot wound to the back of his head, and Tatiana also shot dead. Prosecutors say she was shot in the torso and at close range in the neck, which killed her. Now, even though Don and Tatiana's bodies were found on February 28th, police believe they were killed on February 11th. According to this new criminal complaint, Tatiana went to night school at a local university on February 11th. Video shows that she was in the same clothing from that night when she was found on the 28th. The last few times that Don was seen, one was on a video call with his boss on the 11th in the afternoon, then later that day at the gym. The complaint says that Nikita's last time attending class at his high school was the 11th, and up until that point, a school resource officer said he had perfect attendance. Prosecutors say that Casap moved to the U.S. a decade ago from Moldova with his mom. He was seen apparently as a good student at his high school. In December 2022, he was Student of the Month at Waukesha West High School for the health department. But we learned today in this criminal complaint that it was a different story on social media. A female classmate of Nikita's is now referred to in this case as Witness A. Witness A told police that Nikita added her on Snapchat and wanted to be more than just friends, which she didn't want. Nikita then allegedly unblocked and blocked Witness A multiple times, but eventually police say he started sending her messages about fascism and what he called gore edits, which were gory war and horror videos with Russian music blasting. Witness A also reportedly said that Casap talked about killing his parents and then would say that he wasn't going to follow through with it. Per the complaint, he also talked about wanting to know how it felt to, quote, not exist. Witness A claims that he said these things from December of last year to January of this year. Nikita also allegedly threatened to hurt Witness A if she told anyone about what he had said, telling her, quote, it wouldn't end well for her. Witness A said that she didn't think much of the conversations until Casap stopped showing up for school on February 12th. In the complaint, a neighbor told police that he noticed that Don Meyer stopped shoveling his driveway after the 12th and that he saw Nikita driving away in Don's VW Atlas. Nikita doesn't have a driver's license. Eventually, officers arrested Nikita in the small town of Waukene, Kansas. He allegedly drove through multiple states and hundreds of miles away from Wisconsin. Officers pinged his parents' phones and say they were in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And inside that VW Atlas, when he was pulled over in Kansas, was allegedly a treasure trove of disturbing pieces of evidence. It includes $14,000 in cash, dozens of pieces of jewelry that belong to Tatiana Casap, a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum that police say was missing from the home in Waukesha that Don Meyer apparently owned. And there was also a camera in the trunk of the car. And according to the complaint, the memory card showed footage taken after Don and Tatiana were killed, and it allegedly shows Nikita going into the office where his stepdad's body was, covered in pillows and blankets, keeping candles lit around that dead body. The complaint says that Casap adjusts the camera, so he reportedly knew it was in there recording, and that on one occasion, Casap takes a phone, holds it close to his stepdad's dead body, and says, quote, so you can see him there, I can literally see the bleeping body there. It's unclear in this instance who Nikita was allegedly talking to. We do know that Nikita was allegedly speaking with someone in Russian on the app Telegram. The complaint says that an analysis of Casap's phone shows that there was a message thread where Casap allegedly asks, "How long will I need to hide before I will be moved to Ukraine? 1 to 2 months." And the individual replies in Russian. Casap also allegedly says, quote, "Also, I probably should brush up on my Russian because I can understand just fine, but speaking is harder, LOL." Casap then asks, quote, "So while in Ukraine, I'll be able to live a normal life, even if when it's found out I did it." Then this line. In Russian, he allegedly asks, quote, "That includes the headphones as well? Quality ones to protect hearing from gunshots of a .357 Magnum, just making sure." It's unclear at this point who this person was that Casap was speaking to on Telegram and where they're located. Detectives also say that Casap's phone had pictures of him holding that Smith & Wesson found in the VW Atlas that his stepdad owned, that picture taken allegedly on January 28th. Witness A also told police that Nikita reportedly told her that he was talking with a male in Russian through Telegram, and they were planning to overthrow the US government and assassinate President Trump. Today, Casap appeared in court to be arraigned on these new charges. He had been held on $250,000 bail until today and only charged with allegedly stealing his dad's gun and car as police investigated further. Now that he faces murder charges, the prosecution asked for bail to go up to $5 million.
The state is asking for $5 million cash bail here, as previously indicated by defense and the commissioner. We are moving to dismiss 25 CF 435. We've now added new charges after further investigation into victim A and victim B's death and consolidated those previous charges with the new charges in 25 CF 598. In addition to the conditions previously requested at his last initial appearance, the state is also asking for no contact with witness A, as the defendant did threaten to kill witness A if she told anyone what he was telling her after he had given her information that he was speaking with someone from Russia. The state does believe he's an extreme flight risk here. He was found in Kansas with victim A and victim B's property. He's been speaking with someone in Russian about moving to Ukraine after committing these crimes. So the state is concerned that he's a flight risk if he is ever released. Thank you.
So I was not the court official in the 435 matter. So you indicated that you were asking for the same conditions that were requested in that matter. I can tell you what was ordered, but I don't know what was requested.
I can relay those to the court.
Okay.
With conditions that the defendant be ordered not to leave the state of Wisconsin and surrender his passport, and not to use or possess any dangerous weapons. Based on the information that I previously provided, that we do believe he's a flight risk. He has no living family now in the state of Wisconsin. He was also found with a high amount of cash in his person when he was found in Kansas. So based on all of that information, that is what we were requesting.
Here's what the defense argued.
We're asking the court to essentially maintain the same bail that Mr. Casap has been on, that was on the 435 matter, which is $250,000 cash. The reason that I think that's appropriate is obviously it's not an amount that can be attainable by Mr. Casap or anyone else who potentially could post that for him. He's been in on that cash for a significant period of time already at this juncture. In addition to that, noting obviously the serious nature of the allegations in the new criminal complaint, I would note that looking at the PSA tool, it takes into account the fact that Mr. Casap has absolutely no history, his young age, and things of that nature, and that says that the presumptive pretrial release level would be a level 1. I think $5 million cash is abundantly high and not something that the court needs to order at this juncture. So we would be asking for $250,000 cash. I have no objection to the conditions asked by the state. However, I would note that on the 25 CF 435 matter, Mr. Casap did fill out the passport slip, and it's my understanding that the state is in possession of that passport.
The judge ultimately decided this.
I now have charged and alleged 2 first-degree intentional homicide, the highest counts that we have, quite frankly, in our country, is what's been alleged here. And not only can the court think about the totality of the circumstances, I routinely, it's not the first intentional homicide bail argument that I've heard, and I just don't understand and maybe somebody can make me understand, why aren't they utilizing the section found at 969.035? That's literally what it's made for. We're not even, I don't have to have the whole discussion as to whether or not 5 million is an appropriate amount for a child of 17, 18 years old, or if it's $250 or $10,000 or $100. He's alleged to have been charged. The district attorney's office can bring forward, something alleging underneath 969.035 sub 3. You can say he's not eligible for release. Provide the information, we can go through it, because when I go through this information, I look at this complaint. The subsequent investigation that whatever occurred after the first initial appearance seems to be extremely thorough. It seems to have additional information provided by a witness. It seems to have evidence that's been provided in this complaint of, they're indicating they've got video evidence, they've got communication, they've got transactions, they've got a litany of things, and I just don't understand, because it's not like if you don't get what you request in terms of the pretrial detention that you still don't get to argue bond, right? So I just don't understand, and maybe I'm taking my little 2 seconds to stand on my soapbox to try to figure out what's the amount. Is it 5 million? Is it 10 million? Is it 250? Is it 50? The reality, though, is this allegation, this young man that you would think would not necessarily have access to the sheer volume of funds that is being alleged inside of this complaint, besides the property that was there, the virtual currency that is being alleged, as well as what's alleged as he's connection with somebody. So his access to funds, I have no idea what they are. I don't know if he has access to 10,000 or 250,000 or 2 million. So the reality is I'm going to grant what the state's requesting, but in terms of a high cash bail, but it's not going to be 5 million. I don't even know how I'm going to attribute that. But I am going to give him a $1 million bail. I believe that that's appropriate.
So we have a lot to unpack in this case. Joining me now, former crime scene investigator Ed Wallace, also the co-host of the Crime Time YouTube channel with Judy Ron. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. We spoke when this story first broke and he was under arrest, yet to be charged with murder. Now he's facing these 2 charges among others. We'll talk about the bond situation in a moment, but we have this criminal complaint that we've read through. What's your reaction? There's just so much to talk about in this case after what we just learned in these 14 pages.
Yeah, so reading the 14 pages, I found that the investigators did a very thorough job here. Obviously, there's more to learn. Then they probably have much more evidence than what's established in these documents. But what really is interesting to me is this connection to some overseas person speaking Russian. That is very interesting to me. I mean, what is going on here? And then they have a witness now, witness A, that they're looking to protect, and that this person has information about what he was up to, and there's even information in here of him talking about assassinating President Trump.
It is, and it just really opened the door to a whole world of conversation about the red flags that apparently were out there, especially to witness A, where at the end of last year, he's talking on Snapchat about potentially killing his parents, but then saying it's a joke. He was sending gory things on social media. Then you have these communications on Telegram with someone in Russian where it appears that they were aware of this alleged plan to kill his parents. As far as the evidence, I know you're a former crime scene investigator. What stood out to me was reading that part where there was a surveillance camera apparently in the office where victim A, his stepdad, was killed. What did you make of that piece of evidence and what apparently that camera shows?
Well, that camera was recovered in the trunk of the vehicle at the car stop in Iowa. When they reviewed the images that were on there, it appears that he may have placed a surveillance camera in the room of the dead stepfather, videotaping the dead stepfather as he lay with all the blankets and other items of clothing that the defendant allegedly put over the victim. And the victim had placed candles around, at least 4 candles around the victim. I don't know if the blankets and the candles were used to mask the scent of the decomposition, because these bodies had been laying there. But videotaping on this camera a live feed of this dead body, and at the end, the defendant is seen coming in and leaning over the body with the cell phone, potentially taking a photograph. And then he approaches the camera, takes the camera down off its perch, and talks to the camera about, the dead defendant. So who is he sending these images to? Where are these images going? Is he sending this overseas to some foreign person that he's been communicating with in Russian? I mean, very interesting stuff.
It is. He's originally from Moldova. We learned that
Mhm.
prosecutor said that he had been in the country for about 10 years with his mom. So he's 17. He came to the U.S. when he was 7 years old. Apparently, in the conversations with witness A, he talked a lot about Russia and fascism, and would send gory videos. From a crime scene investigator standpoint, also we learned that the house apparently was ransacked, that art was
Yeah.
taken down off the walls, mattresses were thrown about, drawers were
Mhm.
taken out. He has this $14,000 in cash that he was caught with.
Mhm.
How important is that to the investigation and establishing the narrative that prosecutors are laying out?
Yeah, so with all these things like the artwork taken down off the wall, was it taken down off the wall for a potential sale? Was it taken down off the wall because maybe things were hidden behind it? Because apparently, it appears from the report we just read that they stored money all over the house, cash, $100 bills, in the Bible, in a photo album, and other things. So if he is searching, ransacking this house, looking for that cash that he knows that his mother and the stepfather have around the house, then it would be good to process the frames and the photos, the pictures, any of the items that he may have touched in ransacking for his fingerprints and DNA. Okay, to associate that he in fact was the one ransacking the house in that regard. Um, I mean, even though he lives there, but and he has legal access to some of these things, but this was in the bedroom of the parents, okay, the stepfather and his mother, and the artwork. I mean, why would you be taking the artwork down? What's going on there? So, I mean, finding his fingerprints and DNA on that could be important to show that he in fact was rummaging through the house looking for this cash. In that regard. But there's also the ballistics evidence. There's a lot of good ballistics evidence. Now the autopsies are in, so they have all the information about the wounds and positions of the wounds and so forth. So if I had to guess, based upon what I'm reading so far, it looks like he probably assassinated the father first, shot him in the back of the head. Okay, there's no talk of any struggle or fight in that one room where the father was found. There's no talk of that. I didn't hear anything about ransacking in there either. But it also appears that based upon the law enforcement's ability to track the movement of the mother on the 11th, that she had gone to college. She stopped at a store on the way home, and then she was confronted in the after she parked the BMW in the garage. She was confronted in the hallway between the garage and the kitchen, and she has what appears to be like a defensive bullet wound on her wrist. So there's going to be a lot of ballistic work here, and it appears that they have all this matched up already to the gun. But as a very interesting aspect of this, when you have a close shot into a victim, and the entrance wound and exit wounds in a perforating gunshot wound can leave forward spatter and back spatter. Now the back spatter will head towards the shooter, and I hope that they examine that firearm that they recovered from the vehicle for the presence of blood on the firearm, the barrel, and even down the barrel, because sometimes blood gets sucked down into the barrel in those types of back spatter situations.
And from a digital forensic standpoint, he apparently was sending messages that he was planning to do this at the end of last year on Snapchat, which a lot of kids like to use Snapchat because the messages erase after time. Is there any way law enforcement could eventually find those messages. And I also think of Telegram as an app too that often comes up in some difficult cases because of the protections they can have for the free speech, they say, of the parties that are involved.
Well, they would. I would imagine the detectives here would send get subpoenas and send them to Snapchat and any other social media that this apps that may be on the defendant's phone, and try to gather as much information on there. Now, there's also the other phone involved. Okay, so if these Snapchats were sent to another individual and they saved them on their phone, then that's a way to gather up that information as well.
And he was caught with apparently every piece of jewelry that his mom
Mhm.
had in this car. And also there were 7 tablets. I mean, there was so many pieces of electronics in the car.
Three
When you look
laptops,
at,
phones.
right, 3 laptops, 4 phones, and 7 tablets, which it's just, how many homes is that many tablets? But when you catch a suspect that has all of those things in the car, along with a gun that can now, according to prosecutors, be tied to the shooting deaths of his parents in their home, what does that mean for establishing intent as you're putting this case together?
Why would you take all these electronics unless there's some information of value inside of the electronics? Maybe bank accounts, maybe uh, information about stocks and bonds, things of that nature, financial information. In addition, there could be other information in there about communications with individuals overseas and other issues that are going on. They could have encryption apps on there that he's using as well. He may have uh, emails and other items of evidence linking him to communications with individuals about what is going to transpire. Um, there could be a whole lot of information. Now, the jewelry, obviously, you're talking about over $10,000 worth of jewelry here, according to the estimated value that law enforcement was able to obtain. That could be used to porn to get more money, or that could be used to barter. If he goes overseas to a place like Moldova or Ukraine or Russia, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's so interesting. These text messages or messages on Telegram that were apparently sent to this person in Russian. And I know we were talking before, it's unclear whether that person was in Russia or Moldova, somewhere in Ukraine, or if they're just speaking in Russian. And so that's still a major
Right.
question
I mean, that person could
moving
be
forward.
right.
Right.
That person could be here in the United States, just speaking Russian to them.
And you have experience in Moldova, which I do want to talk about in just a moment. So really the perfect
Mhm.
person to talk about, which is where Nikita Casap is originally from. But I want to talk about the court hearing today because he was arraigned on these new charges. Prior, he was just being charged with stealing a gun and stealing a car. Those were the charges that he was facing for allegedly doing that. And he was being held on $250,000 bail with the belief that more charges were coming. Now that these charges are here, you had the prosecution asking for $5 million bond. The defense wanted $250,000 to keep it there. The judge decides to go with $1 million bond. What do you make of that decision?
I don't understand any of that. He's a flight risk. He had passports, his mother's and his, in the car. He had all this cash. There's talk on the social media and whoever he was talking to about fleeing the country after they did the killings to go to Ukraine and lay low there. So I don't understand why they just didn't ask for him to be remanded and stay in prison, no bond. I don't understand that. Maybe his age. I'm not sure. But the judge did mention some Wisconsin rule that none of the parties here sought to use, and he said it was appropriate to use. I don't know what that rule entails, but I don't think he can make the bond. He has no relatives that can assist him that way. I know there was some talk of that he had a crypto account with like $14,000 in it. I don't know where that came from or how he got it or who put the money in the crypto. Is it this person he's speaking in Russian to? We don't know. So I was miffed by this whole thing. They're claiming he's a flight risk. well then remand them, no bond.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a case here where certainly the most serious charges, and the judge mentioned that. I mean, it doesn't get more serious than a double
Murder
murder
one.
charge, right?
Yeah.
And also he's communicating with someone in Russian. There's just so many different elements to this story. I know for you and your experience that you've actually worked in Moldova and you
Mhm.
know Eastern Europe, and certainly from the news are far more aware of Russia and Ukraine today than maybe they were 10 years ago. But what can you tell us about where Nikita Casap is originally from and some of the actors that could be involved here when we think about this mystery of who he's talking to on Telegram?
You know, who knows who's manipulating him? But Moldova is bordering Ukraine and Romania on certain borders, and it's an old Soviet Union republic. You know, during the Cold War, the Soviets manipulated, and to this day, um, Russian influence is heavy in this region in trying to control the politics of what's going on in that nation. When I visit there, you see all the old remnants of Cold War era Russian communist architecture in the housing and so forth. There are some more modern sections of Moldova that I visited, but by and large, very rural, very agricultural based, and so forth.
Yeah, and he moved to the United States apparently 10 years ago with his mom, so he would have been 7 when he left the country. It's unclear what family situation he has in Moldova. I know they said he has a grandmother, but other than that, it doesn't appear he has a lot of family. So there's just a lot of questions, though we seem to be learning more with each court appearance. For you moving forward, obviously a big question is who's he talking to on Telegram? As an investigator, what else at this point stands out to you as we start to piece together what prosecutors say happened?
Well, they're going to have to go through all of those electronics. They're going to have to do a full digital forensic examination of the iPads, the phones, the laptops. They're going to have to download the infotainment system on the vehicle, okay, and get all that information. They're going to have to see, you know, who he was texting and communicating with. You know, and I know they already have some of this information, but do they have the full picture? Okay, were they able to capture some of these encrypted messages or Russian messages in Russian rather, back and forth and translate them appropriately to understand the conversations that were going on? Where were those videos being sent from that surveillance camera of the defendant's dead stepdad? Okay, who was he sending that information, those images to? Who was he talking to in the camera at the end before he pulled the camera down off the perch and stopped the filming of the dead stepfather? There's a lot of things here. Again, we want they have some information about you know, the cell phone pings and the towers and the movements. So they should be able to get more data from his cell phone inside the house at the time they say the attacks occurred on the 11th. What movement in and around the house? Because as I've been party to, they can track your movements in your house on your cell phone
Yep.
if the setup of the phone is activated, and you can see him going from room to room to room, and maybe you can associate that with the ransacking that was going on between the time he killed his stepfather and the time his mother came home, and maybe you have that interaction too, because you can see the movement of the mother's cell phone entering the house, and you can get that all correlated in timestamp as to actually when he confronts her in that hall between the kitchen and the garage.
And just finally, now that the bodies were discovered February 28th, it's almost a month later, and here he is being charged with murder. When you look at this criminal complaint and all the different elements that are involved, does it make sense that it took this long to formally charge him with 2 counts of murder?
Yeah, given the amount of work they had to do, the amount of legwork they had to do, the amount of digging into the digital stuff, the other evidence from the phone, and also the communications, the interviewing of the different players involved, the neighbors, the co-workers, the college, this high school. So there was a lot of work to be doing, and you know, he was they were playing catch up because he already had a week before they figured out what was going on here. You know,
Yeah.
I think it was what, they entered the 28th, so this happened on the 11th, and they entered the house on the 28th to find the decedents.
Right. And yeah, they believed that he was in the house for roughly
Right.
2 weeks. And then today we learned that he might have been filming the
Right.
bodies. It's a story that just seems, yeah, every time we talk about it, there's just some new kind
Mhm.
of bombshell. I know it's a cliche, but bombshell development that's come into it. Yeah.
Yeah, and the
Um,
faces were badly decomped, and the medical examiner couldn't use the faces for identification, so they most likely used dental records to identify the victims.
yeah. And we'll see what happens next. He's due back in court next month. So I'm sure we'll be continuing to talk about this as we learn more. Ed Wallace, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for taking the time to be with us today.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Nikita Casap is due in court next on April 9th. For On the Case presented by Law and Crime, I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.